Hello, everyone. Good morning. I would like to welcome my listeners and viewers in the United States and all around the world. I am Vince Rocco, and it is Tuesday here in New York City, so let's go behind the headlines and get the real story. But first, this is a special edition of Talking New York Real Estate, the state of our industry. Up front today, vacation is over. Today we begin a new season, Season 10, and this season is going to be the best of all. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for your continued dedication and support. We greatly appreciate it. The New York City real estate market is grappling with significant legal issues, particularly in light of the National Association of Realtors settlement, which has implications for how commissions are disclosed and paid in real estate transactions. This settlement is pushing for greater transparency, potentially altering the traditional broker commission structure, which could impact both buyers and sellers. Additionally, the potential reform for elimination of the 1031 exchange programs, which allows investors to defer capital gains taxes on property exchanges, is causing uncertainty among investors. This program has been a critical tool for the real estate investment community, and changes could slow down transactions and alter investment strategies in New York City's high-value markets. Lastly, new rental rules, including stricter rent control measures and tenant protections, are causing tension between landlords and tenants. These rules aim to increase affordability, but landlords argue they stifle investment and property maintenance. These combined legal challenges are reshaping the dynamics of the real estate industry here in New York and creating a more cautious atmosphere among stakeholders. We will discuss, and we will have all that and so much more as Talking New York Real Estate gets underway on this Tuesday morning. And in the news this morning, the U.S. Open was in full swing at the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center in Queens. As the fourth and final Grand Slam tournament of the year, it is the last chance for the world's best tennis players to win a title, making it one of the most thrilling competitors in sports. It all ended on Sunday, but the memories will remain. This has always been a world-class event in New York City and brings to town so many dignitaries and celebrated people. Everyone likes at least one day at the event. Now, with a successful finish, we wait until next year. And there is a plan to add dedicated bus lanes along the 96th Street corridor, and that has sparked outrage for some Upper West Side residents. The Department of Transportation's proposal, first introduced to several Manhattan community boards back in May, would limit general traffic along the corridor to a single lane and convert the outer traffic lanes into dedicated bus lanes. During a press conference last Thursday, a group of local residents and elected officials said the plan would exacerbate existing congestion issues and further affect the quality of life in the area. Another potential shit show, as I say, like the increase in bus lanes, and then all of it is so not necessary. Surrounded by the historic homes and winding streets of the West Village, a 21-foot wide townhouse at 45 Borough Street is the very picture of curb appeal. Built in 1828, the Federal-style row house, asking $7.75 million, is a piece of neighborhood history. It was reborn in the 21st century via a 2-year renovation. Inside, the 4-story brick home has the comfortable look and elegance and charm of a country estate, filled with well-chosen color and textured frame by modern amenities. New York City is moving forward with a plan to put the park back in Park Avenue. The Department of Transportation released a request for proposal last Tuesday, seeking designs to transform the traffic medians on Park Avenue between East 46th Street and East 47th Street, with more green space and pedestrians, friendly areas, and more. We will see. And TV host Andy Cohen is selling his longtime West Village home. The one-of-a-kind apartment at 2 Horatio Street is a combination of 4 units assembled by Cohen over the last 20 years. While not on the market publicly yet, the home will be listed later this month for $14 million. Ryan Serhant of Serhant, a former Bravo alum and the current star of Owning Manhattan on Netflix, has the listing. And finally, tomorrow marks the 23rd anniversary of September 11th, that horrific day when America was attacked by terrorists. More than 3,000 people were killed that day, as the rest of us remain saddened and shocked at what we saw. I was deep in the middle of all of it, running for my life, and I will never forget that. We must never forget. My thoughts on all of that coming next week. And with me today at the table from Brown Harris Stevens are Dorothy Somack, James Bruni, Mike Lubin, and Peter Grabard from Grabard and Bloomingfield Law.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
All right, everybody, the start of season 10 is right now. Good to be here with all of you, and thank you once again for being here. We love it. At the table with me today, 4 real experts from Brown Harris Stevens and Grubbard Law. So we want to talk today about some of the changes that have come down to our industry. I've said before, and I said it before the show began, one of the most consistent things in our industry is change. We never know when it's happening. We never know what it's going to mean, but we have to adapt. We always do. We will continue to. But in the meantime, until we get used to or comfortable with these changes, we have to kind of flush them out and understand what they are. The National Association of Realtors commission settlement was just recently, I think August 17th is when it went into practice. For those locations that use the MLS service. We here in New York City do not use MLS, but we're waiting for our Real Estate Board of New York to come down with their decision on how we are going to fit into that settlement. In the meantime, it is business as usual. And we'll get to a little bit about that. But Peter, I want to start with you about how will, in your opinion, this NAR settlement affect the traditional commission structure in New York City real estate transactions as you're being, told by other agents that you work with, other managers that you work with? How is it really going to affect the buyers, the sellers, and just the industry in general here in New York City?
Well, I think from a procedural standpoint, the way it's being proposed and the way it's going to work is that now, buyers are going to have to sign brokerage commission agreements. There's going to be full disclosure, full transparency on what the buyer will have to pay in terms of commission if the seller is not offering a buyer's commission. How that plays out, how that affects a buyer, how that affects the market, how that affects a sales price, we'll have to wait and see. I know NAR's tagline, and Rebney's is, commissions have always been negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
That's true, but how often, were they actually negotiated in the past? Now, for the first time, I think that's going to become a real issue.
But not to interrupt you, but I think, when I hear that too, and I hear that all the time, the negotiability on commissions that always existed, really think about it. That was between the agents and the sellers, right? Not the buyers. It was between the agents and the sellers. Now, when we talk about a commission structure change, or buyers needing to pay commission, that is where it gets a little slippery, because that's where it never existed before. Right. And I think that's where it's going to become a problem.
Right. And so you don't need to be an expert to guess how that may affect the marketplace, right? Because if a buyer is now having to pay a commission, the buyer may choose not to work with a buyer's agent and only search for listings on the internet, on StreetEasy, on the other sites that have listings, and then only work with a seller's agent when making an offer, or the price will be reduced that they offer because they also have to pay a commission. So, those are certainly possible outcomes, but in a sophisticated marketplace like New York, there's also the possible outcome of the seller recognizing that driving the most traffic to their listing is how they're going to get the best price, and that is likely going to mean having to pay the buyer's agent so that the buyer does not have to. I would like to think that that's probably how it's going to go, and that's how a seller will maintain the highest price, both through traffic and through taking on the burden of the buyer's commission. But we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out and how it affects the market. It's just yet one additional obstacle being thrown into the real estate mix that sort of makes it a little bit difficult for real estate investors and property owners in the city. But like you said, everybody will have to adapt, and I'm sure they will.
It's an adjustment, and I also think, and we'll hear from the agents too in a second, but I also think it's going to become a matter of, communications or stepping up our communication skills, right? We're always talking to sellers, we're always talking to buyers, we're always negotiating something, as Peter said. However, I think, in this particular case, because it's all brand new and because people don't understand it, we're going to have to talk to our sellers and our buyers very differently than we ever used to. Mike Lubin, so, in your book of business at the moment, have you encountered any obstacles where it comes to, utilizing, a buyer agreement or talking to a buyer about potentially not being able to show you, this is where it gets a little sticky, an apartment because maybe the seller isn't going to pay a commission? I mean, how are you going to handle that? How have you, if you have already handled that?
As well, I think one of these days you're going to host a show about things that are making our jobs easier.
From your lips to God's ears, as they say, right? Okay.
Thank you for asking. I've actually had my first seller on a new listing push back on paying the buyer's commission.
Me too.
And I had to explain that we are still in a buyer's market. And in fact, we're offering higher commission when we're trying to attract buyers. I'm part of the 393 West End sales team. 4 bedrooms are paying 5%. Our 3 bedrooms are paying 4%.
I saw that.
So I had to explain to the seller, we want the activity. Maybe in certain markets where you put a house on and overnight you have 20 offers, it's a different story, but that's not the market that we're in. Right. So we need to attract buyers and their brokers. And I don't know that I convinced the seller otherwise. I mean, it was really the first time I had to have that conversation.
Yeah. And again, I think we need to sharpen our communication skills because I think it's going to become a little more complicated. And look, like everything else, every seller is different. Every buyer is different. Every seller or buyer has a different thought or a different thinking of how it should be or what they want to do. Dorothy Somack, so, I know developers, right now are still paying buyer commissions, as Mike said, 4% on one size, 5% on another size. Incredible in this marketplace, right? We want to incent buyers to come out there and buy, especially at higher prices. In your business, in your day-to-day activity, have you experienced anything like this yet, or are you about to, or what's the deal?
Well, on one of my exclusives, the owner said, well, I understand now that we only have to pay 3%. So, of course, I had to educate her. Well, you can pay 3% to me, to my company, but you're going to deter a lot of people, a lot of other buyers from coming to you. And I convinced her, and it wasn't very difficult. She understood it. You want more exposure. It's like a broker selling their own property. Sometimes a broker thinks, well, I'm a broker, so I don't need to hire a broker. But you bring more people in
Absolutely.
when you have the local area brokers working on it. So it's the same thing. And I just want to say there are countries, I think most of Europe does 50-50. Like I know in Israel.
50-50?
Commission.
Yeah.
The seller pays 50% and the buyer's agent, the buyer pays 50%. In Israel, that's how it is. I think if you're used to it and that market is how it is, it works. But this is something very foreign to us. And I think a lot of people are going to go back to the old way.
A lot of people said to me when all of this started breaking, by the time the seller community and the buyer community hear about this, we're going to be way past whatever changes we need to make. And I said, do you realize where you are? We're in New York City. They're going to hear about it the minute it's out there.
Of course.
Which, of course, they have. And
right.
I've had 2 or 3 seller conversations. One of them I walked away from because they flat out refused. And that apartment is on the market in a building I sell to all the time, right next to another exclusive of mine in the building. They get no traffic. They get no one coming to visit. And the agent is pulling her hair out. Don't ask me. What do you think, Jim?
I feel like in the effort for more transparency that we've created more headache and murkiness. I feel as if, yes, okay, commissions were always negotiable. It was a little opaque. Maybe buy side didn't understand that as often as they needed to. But now we have, whereas we were more transparent in many regards because of the MLS, because that commission paid to buy side was there. Now it's not. So every time you represent as an agent a buyer, you have to get in touch with each one of those individual agents, listing agents for those properties to see if they're paying.
Oh, boy.
Right? And how much time and effort is that? It is, in the sense that some agents don't call you back, right?
I was just going to say that to Jim's point, normally that information would be on our system, right?
Correct.
3%, 2%, 2.5%, whatever the buy side was. Now it's nothing.
No, nothing.
We have to make a phone call.
We have to make a phone call, which
Good
is
luck getting a response back.
Yes, sometimes you don't. But then there's just more paperwork that's added to this. Sure, okay, if I'm representing a tenant, theoretically I should have an agreement that says I've showed this tenant X, 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 and X property, right? So it's spilling over into buy side, whereas we never had to do that before, right? It was simply just the agency agreement. Now you can have, are buyers going to sign, in the age of online searches, an exclusivity agreement with you as a buyer?
Well, we're
buyer
going to talk about that in a minute, but go ahead. You're right.
But then it's, okay, do I have to do an agreement for every single property that I show, right? For all these people. And then it's, of course, the whole open house issue comes to play. And so it's creating a lot of nuance where I see there just really didn't need to be.
I teach continuing education for experienced agents in the business 2 years, plus we have to renew our license every 2 years, whatever. And I will tell you, whenever this conversation comes up in class, whatever the class is, the agents are freaking out. Extra paperwork, extra work, extra phone calls, okay, extra emails, with the hope that you're going to get a response back, which in our community, by the way, hardly ever. Okay, so
I might also add
a little bit more of an issue, I believe.
How are brokerages monitoring this?
Well, they're not.
How is the state? How is the Department of State? How are they going to monitor these buy-side agreements, et cetera?
Well, they're not at the moment.
At the moment.
Right. And you're right. How are they going to do that? I can't imagine. What about the rental market? How has the rental market been affected by these commission settlement changes? Is it we're in a buyer market, as Mike said before, but not every buyer is buying. Okay, we're in a defined buyer's market, and I love it, and I say this every week, so forgive me. Buyers don't buy in a buyer's market. They just don't buy. But nonetheless, we're in a buyer's market. What about the rental market? How are landlords keeping their tenants in place? We all know that the rental prices are not low.
Well, I think for Manhattan,
they're moderated, but they're still high.
In the median in Manhattan and Brooklyn, respectively, $4,400 and $4,000, which was high in July. So it may be a bit, it's not increasing as much, and it's coming off a little bit, but we're still posting highs.
And I find that for September, it's not that busy in the rental.
Are you?
I do rentals at the Sheffield because I live there. That's really the only building that I rent.
Right.
And, by now, we should have had a lot more interest, a lot more inquiries, and we're not getting that many. So
interesting.
It is.
Do you think
unusual.
that because they're on the sidelines waiting for this interest rate environment to improve and then buy?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of buyers just waiting for things to change.
Well, that elephant in the room, the interest rate, we've been talking about that all year, actually started last year, and that will change. We are hearing 50 basis points, from the Fed Chair's office, which, by the way, not a bad first time cut. I mean, we'd all like it to be a lot more. A full point would be great, but 50 basis points is not a bad start. And let's see where it goes. And as most people understand and have said for years, in a presidential election year, regardless of, what side of the fence you're on, there's always going to be, some kind of relief on the interest rate side. All right, we have to take a break. We will be right back. No one's going anywhere. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Okay, we are back. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, one of you guys mentioned it before, the online search engines that exist out there and have existed out there for a very long time. And again, a lot of agents say to me, in trying to understand or grapple with how we are going to proceed forward with these new restrictions and these new rules, et cetera, a lot of people feel like the buyers are going to go or continue to use applications like StreetEasy and Zillow and whatever to find the listings that they want. And now when they hear that they may have to pay a commission if they go, work with a buyer's agent, what does that say, right? Go ahead.
Part of the trouble of that, I think, is that, and half of my business is working with buyers, is that it's not until you're deeper in the process with a buyer do they realize what an important service you provide.
Correct.
Between financing and negotiating and contractors and everything else, it becomes such a hands-on. We're not just throwing them a listing once in a while and collecting it is so involved. Yep. And how at that early stage in the process, or where you haven't proven yourself to them, are they going to commit to you? Mm-hmm. It's a consumer beware, economy, market, world.
You are so right, Mike. That is so perfectly said, because this is an industry where we transact real estate so far different than anywhere else in the world. Okay, and without buyer representation, kind of you're screwed. Okay, because what he said before, we get involved in every aspect of the transaction. Referring attorneys, referring contractors if necessary, on and on and on and on, holding your hand through. So buyers out there, if you're listening, pay attention to what the transaction really. Anybody, my 10-year-old nephew could look at a listing system and say, "Oh, I like that apartment. I want to go see it." Right? That doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
I have the perfect example of that right now. I'm representing a buyer of a $40 million apartment. Okay, downtown. Yeah. Well, this is a sophisticated buyer, but he found the apartment on his own without the use of a broker. Sure. Negotiated the price on his own before even contacting me, and then when he contacted me to review the contract, he's buying from a sponsor, and I said, "Well, was there any attempt to negotiate the transfer taxes?" He didn't know what I was talking about. The transfer taxes on the seller side for a $40 million apartment is over $800,000. Sure. Okay. So I had to go back to the attorney and say, "We don't want to pay the transfer taxes." And they said, "We're not renegotiating the deal." And he's going to pay it. But these are the type of things where if you're going to jump into the market without the advice of an expert, of a buyer's agent or an attorney, but really especially a buyer's agent who can educate you on the marketplace, on the closing costs, and help you assemble a team of professionals, it could really cost you money. And I have the utmost example of that right now.
That's a perfect example. I mean, and even if it's the apartment was a lot less, there are things that are still negotiable. Transfer taxes, mansion taxes, attorneys' fees, the developer's attorney's fees that usually are paid by the buyer, right? These things can be and oftentimes are.
I mean, and
that's a big number, $800,000.
Adding insult to injury, I mean, he's going to pay $40 million for this apartment, and he has to pay the sponsors $3,500 attorney fee.
Oh my God!
Well, here you go.
Right. I love it.
Okay, but the good news for you is he's agreed to do it, right? Okay, he could have done differently, but he agreed to do it. Take heed, okay, because that's a perfect example, and people who don't understand how we transact business can get themselves in financial, difficulty. All right, we're going to have a lot more on the NAR settlement as we go through. We're going to touch on it a little bit each week as we go through the change, as the process changes, as we as agents here in the field actively working with buyers and sellers learn more and understand how it works. But I want to turn our attention now to the 1031 exchange program. All right, the 1031 exchange program is potentially changing, okay? And we all know what that is. So I'm going to ask Dorothy to first and foremost explain to us what actually is, for the listeners and viewers out there, what is the 1031 exchange program?
So the 1031 exchange allows you to defer your capital gains tax as long as you buy the property for the same amount or greater. You rent the property. It's got to be something that's rentable and has been rented for, they say, could be 1 year, but it's really more likely 2 years. And you have to exchange it for the same amount or more. If you exchange it for less, you have to pay capital gains on that difference. And it's really wonderful because it really builds up your portfolio, and you can keep going and buying more properties and expanding.
You can buy and sell for years without paying any capital gains tax.
Without deferring it. Yeah, eventually you would pay it if you don't have a good trust and and you want to sell something and just keep the money. But it really helps you grow, and I think it's a great product that people that understand it can use. I use it a lot. I've done two back
done
to
it too.
back in the last 2 years, and I've been able to save money. I earned, I made money on the first one, and I was able to put that away and not have to pay tax on it, which would have brought me down to the same base if I did pay tax. So it's really wonderful, and I hope it stays. I don't think that this new proposal that Biden made for 2025 is going to take effect because it has to pass Congress, and I just don't think it will pass. So I'm not too worried about it.
Peter, what are some of the specific changes that the exchange program are proposing?
First, I think it's worth noting that the 1031 tax deferred exchange is not some modern day creation, right? The statute is 100 years old. Okay,
I didn't know that either. Wow.
Right, and it really hasn't changed much over 100 years. There have been some minor tweaks to it, and most recently, the most productive change to it has been to allow people to invest the proceeds from the sale of their commercial or income-producing property into co-ownership of replacement property. So it's no longer that you have to buy, if you sell something as an individual, you have to buy something as an individual. Now you can invest that into a conglomerate, into a trust that is owning real estate, and that was the what really blew open the 1031. The proposed changes in Biden's new budget would be, and Biden's administration is basically saying, this is the only industry in which you're basically getting an interest-free loan from the government because you're deferring the capital gains. But the counter to that is, but you're not realizing any cash from the sale, right? You're not pulling anything out.
No.
You're increasing your investment. So why should you be taxed if you're not actually realizing the gain? The gain is being invested into an additional property. Yes, you're using the government's money, the government's taxes that you would have otherwise had to pay to increase the value of your investment. But you're not realizing any profit from it. Okay. So his proposed changes are to limit for an individual a 1031 for up to $500,000 of gain, and any profit above $500,000 you'll have to pay tax on. And if you're a married couple doing it, $1 million.
$1 million.
Okay. That's going to significantly affect lots of people who use the 1031 properly. Now, there are a lot of people who use the 1031 improperly. They buy a second home or a vacation home, and then they sell that, and they say, "Oh, well, that was an investment property." It doesn't. It's not supposed to be. It's certainly not for your primary residence. There are other ways to deal with that, but it's not supposed to be for your second home or your vacation home either. It's supposed to be for income producing property or commercial property. And that could really affect small business owners. It could affect real estate investors who purchase and sell income-producing property. So it could have a really negative effect.
Right.
Dorothy, based on what Peter just said, so what would be some of the potential consequences? If the 1031 was completely reformed or eliminated?
I think
to investors out there, you're an investor, and many other people we know and work with are investors, and our clients. What does this do?
I don't think I would do them anymore. For $500,000, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in New York. Right now, I just invested I sold one property at a profit, and I was able to invest in a syndication, which was great. Not only that, I had an $800,000 mortgage on the first property, which I was able to shelter in the syndication. So I didn't have to pay that off, and I didn't have to pay the taxes on it. Huge benefit for me. And with that, I was able to put some money in the syndication and buy another property. I wouldn't do that again if I had to pay tax on it. For $500,000, it's not worth it. So I think they would lose a lot of investors and therefore lose a lot of jobs because I'm going to hire a crew to renovate the property that I bought. That would be gone. And so many other small businesses like me are going to walk away from it. It would be terrible. We lose billions of dollars.
Look what the SALT Act, or whatever it was called, did to the condo investor or purchasers in New York City, right? Limited $10,000 a year in write-offs. I mean, that's nothing, right?
It is nothing. I was going to bolster your point, Dorothy, that I read somewhere Ernst & Young in 2021 did a survey about 1031 exchanges and the economic impact. It creates, if I remember correctly, roughly 975,000 jobs and over 97 billion in economic GDP activity, which results in roughly 13 billion or so in tax revenue to municipalities, et cetera. So it is a profound impact.
And I don't think this was thought out well. You know, the people in real estate understand
most of them are
these
not,
things.
right?
And you know, the politicians don't always really.
And by the way, it's not just going to negatively affect real estate investors. It's going to affect small business owners who own their real estate
on the commercial side,
right?
absolutely.
Because if you need to expand, right, on your mechanic's garage or on your storefront that you own, and you need to trade up, but now you have to pay, the capital gains on the profit that the sale of your real estate, brings you. Well, that's going to prevent you from trading up as much as you need to.
It's a program to stimulate business.
Yeah.
Why take away a program that generates revenue, that generates business? I feel like more and more are taken away, and certainly, with interest rates changing the way they did, you're just putting more people on the sidelines.
That was my thoughts precisely. I mean, we're taking, investment opportunities away from people that directly affect our business, right? And so, again, I'm not completely sure why or how it's going to get resolved. But what are we doing as an industry in lobbying, lobbying for or against these reforms? Are we doing anything as an industry? Quite frankly, I haven't really read or heard of anything other than this is out there, this is what is proposed. But what are we doing about it? I mean, again, with all the changes that we do that we go through in this business, we could be fighting every day about something. Okay, marching on City Hall over the rental commission drama. The past summer. What are we doing as far as reform is concerned? Are we doing anything?
Do we really think that this would ever pass? I mean, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Yeah. But
so I think that's why people aren't really lobbying,
especially in the current Congress.
It won't. Wasn't this just proposed in August?
Correct. Very new.
So I'm not worried. I'm really not. I don't think it's going to happen, and that's why I'm waiting.
In your opinion, is it giving investors or buyers the impetus to start moving quicker before things do change?
Well, I mean,
have you noticed anything like that?
You have to wait for the property for 2 years.
Well,
I mean,
that's
you can't
true.
just speed it up.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a process that you have to go through. So.
Peter, you wanted to say something?
I haven't heard of any lobbying efforts. I have spoken to a couple of the qualified intermediaries that I use when doing 1031 transactions, and they're concerned because that's all they do, right? But I haven't heard of any real lobbying efforts on the legislature regarding it.
I haven't either, and like Jim just said, it's really kind of new from August. In fact, until you and I talked about it, I'm like, wait a minute, I got to look that up because I didn't even hear about that, right? All right, more to come on that. Let's talk about the rental law changes. How are the new rental regulations such as stricter rent control and tenant protection measures influencing landlord behavior in terms of investment, maintenance, and property development? What is going on in the rental industry right now today? Jim, question.
We're seeing, of course, if you're talking about the large multifamily owners, that's been a ripple effect from the Tenant Protection Act of 2019, right? And so we're just adding more fuel to the fire here in the sense of yes, there are regulations they have to adhere to, but as taxes have gone up and just the overall costs of insurance, especially insurance, then it's a equation. And what ends up happening, in my opinion, is, and what I think we've seen is that the viability of the properties decrease, they decline. They're not well maintained. And
why would anybody spend money? Why would a landlord spend money on a building where he can't increase his rent ever?
Correct.
And he's stuck with it.
right,
Of course
and can
not.
only write off a certain amount
Exactly.
of repairs every year, right?
Well,
That's
that
capped.
well that begs the question. With these rent stabilized buildings or rent controlled buildings, where there are owners of these buildings and they have owned these buildings for many, many years,
For sure.
and they don't have the money to increase.
You're seeing these
services.
portfolios sell at discounts, like
Yep.
huge discounts.
And
Yeah.
people are not buying in New York, by the way. They're buying in other places
Right.
where they don't have these restrictions.
Yes. But then we have the new act that is limiting free market in terms of the rental increases,
That's it.
right?
Yeah.
Good cause. And when you're equating, okay, a landlord has to fulfill these certain requirements for good cause, right? But if you're talking about renegotiating and actually increasing monthly rents, it's effectively capped at the New York City, I believe, or state inflation. I'm not sure exactly at that point, but plus 5% or a max of 10, right? And so if you've got a landlord that has rented an apartment, made some improvements, and then wanted to bring it back to the market, but it'd be a market increase in rent. I mean, it would, if the tenant was savvy, then and they would see this good cause, then that was the case for a lawsuit. So these caps, and especially if it's I understand rent stabilized and rent controlled, but in the free market now is what we're experiencing.
Yeah, Mike, in the free market, good point. Are you seeing prices continue to increase? Have they flattened a bit? Given the fact that we are in a buyer's market right now, what's really happening with the prices of rentals?
I think it's very much about the location. If you have something in the West Village or Soho, or the Upper West Side, markets where there is really low inventory, it's a completely different story. But if you look downtown, the financial district or Upper East Side, where there could be 100 two-bedrooms for $6,000 a month. And ironically, what it's doing is, Jim, when you mentioned, the median rent, when you think about how much one has to earn, that 40-time ratio, you have to make $150,000 a year to get to rent that median apartment. So what's happening is whatever the middle class is, there's a perception that New York is a city of the ultra rich and everyone's a billionaire. It's actually a city of a lot of people just getting by with good jobs and loans and student debt. There's a real cross section in New York. So, anything that is protective of tenant rights, of course, is a wonderful sentiment behind it. We're protecting people who earn less money and deserve to have a home to live in. But it's also dramatically impacting people who are in a professional situation, who want to stay in New York and not have to move and be part of the fabric of a community. So it seems like it's, the balance has to be correct. And I feel like it's swinging too far in one direction.
And tenant protection is fine, but then you have to carry that through all the way, right? You can't just protect the tenant while you increase property taxes, while the cost of insurance goes up, while the cost of construction is at an all-time high, the cost of materials, because then there won't be any properties left for tenants.
Where is that balance, though?
To rent. It doesn't exist because it's a political, football that politicians use to get votes.
Have you seen now that there's talk about reviving single room occupancies, SROs?
Oh boy, yeah. I did.
Mm-hmm. And even a layer on top of that
I can't
is
even imagine.
only a nonprofit could own or operate an SRO. Nobody for profit. So that's another thing that's being introduced.
I did hear that at one point, and I honestly I can't even imagine that. I mean, that would be catastrophic at a minimum. Okay, I mean literally. But listen, the rent regulations and the rental changes. I have to think though that many people out there, and to Mike's point before, there are people who want to live here. There are people who graduate school, who come from other states, other areas of our country, who want to locate or relocate and come to New York City and start a life, like we all did way back whenever. But I'm hearing, through many conversations, that it's becoming increasingly more difficult, and more difficult because of prices, more difficult because of other issues in, our city. And so, they say to me, well, what do I do? Right? How do I afford to do this? I'm only starting my job. I'm only making so much money. Yeah, I'm on a trajectory or a path where I'm going to do much better going forward, but I only have what I have starting out.
It's almost impossible if one doesn't have a parent, a wealthy parent.
Well, that's, yeah.
So you're creating a system where only the elite can survive.
Right.
Yeah,
So
but
ironically, it's undermining whatever the program
Well,
is meant to do.
I think
Correct.
we've gotten to that point where only the elite can survive here. And, we hear that complaint all the time about everything, but I'm really beginning to wonder, is this what it's all about? Let's hold our thought one more minute. We got to take a quick break. We're coming right back and continuing this conversation. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
Okay, so talking about, that elite environment. Dorothy, you wanted to make a point before the break?
So what I wanted to say is, are you including the boroughs when you say this?
All of New York City.
Because this is what has increased the development and the construction and renovation of the other boroughs. I mean, Brooklyn is amazing. Queens is now
The
unbelievable.
Bronx,
People
too.
love it.
Mott
Even
Haven
the Bronx.
especially
Oh, my
has
God.
just been on
We
fire.
still have lower prices there,
Yeah.
lower rents there. And the other thing is that in Manhattan, I find that a lot of tenants are not moving around as much.
No, they're not.
They're staying put because
And
what
renewing.
else can they get? And then they have to pay a fee again. So that's where the market is with rentals here. That's why we don't see a lot of activity.
Right. And I'm not quite sure that that's going to change in the immediate future. I mean, I believe, again, we adjust to almost everything that we're dealt with. But when I look across the boroughs, there was a time when Brooklyn was cheaper. Everybody ran to Brooklyn to purchase and to rent. Now it's kind of flipped around.
Yeah.
Brooklyn is not
For
so
many
cheap.
years.
For many years,
Many years
right?
now.
It's flipped around. And so we're kind of at, even keel. Bronx, some parts of Queens. Although I understand the inventory in Queens is really kind of depleted these days because, like everything else, when the prices are affordable, everybody runs to that area, and then it now all of a sudden is out of inventory, and then the prices start going up. Let's talk a little bit about with that in mind, with the sales business in mind. What is the current state of our market today, Mike? Where are we today, September of 2024?
I will say we did not have a fall season last fall. We didn't have a spring season. I feel like we're having a beginning of a fall season. And any movement down on the interest rates has helped us. Even if it's more psychological than budget, it feels encouraging to people. So I'm definitely seeing more people looking who put their search on hold, and they will be very price sensitive. And that's what sellers have to realize. We cannot price aspirationally. We have to attract buyers who are back in the market, but whose expenses are much higher than they would have been a few years ago. Maintenance is much higher than it used to be. Everything is more expensive, and that's the important factor. But we are seeing more people looking, but they're being careful.
But one of the things I've said consistently on this program in the last year or so is maintenance, as you just said, has increased significantly in all buildings, condo buildings and co-op buildings, to the point where, I'm hearing at the start of this year, into 2024, 14, 15% increases, 12%, 10%.
We never heard those numbers.
We never heard of those numbers.
It's
2, 3,
insurance.
4%, maybe
2,
tops.
3, 4%, maybe 5% if you want to push it.
Maybe.
But the cost of energy, the cost of insurance premium, the cost of everything has created that. Now, on top of that, you add the interest rates that were a little over 7% at its high. And buyers are like, okay, so right now, honestly, Vince, it's not only about the purchase price, because we can kind of figure that out, but it's these monthlies that I just can't get by with my current salary, right? So where does it all land is what people are saying today. The Fed says and let's see if this happens in the next week, I believe next week, 50 basis point reduction in interest rate. Will that set the tone or change the psychology a little bit? Yes, it will. And I believe it will get those buyers out there in droves. Thank the good Lord. But we'll see.
But is it enough to get the sellers to move?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right, because a lot of those sellers are still enjoying their 3% mortgage rates, their 3.5% mortgage rates.
Well said. Yeah.
And it's certainly heading in the right direction. But is it enough to get that person who says, well, maybe I'd like to move, maybe I'd like to, change my location, maybe I'd like to
seller, as we say.
Yeah, you have to be right. You really need to sell.
Around.
Exactly.
And there are plenty of people that use adjustable rate mortgages. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
So
my
the
nephew just got a
panacea
great
of
rate at 5.something%, 5.3%.
Sure.
Adjustable, and it can't, the minute rates go down, he can reduce that.
Which is great.
Come on now, that's incredible.
But these
Not here, up in
these
Connecticut.
guys, yeah, exactly. That these guys that are sitting on the 30-year fixed, fantastic. But there were plenty of people who financed New York City property with ARMs.
I feel like the majority did.
Yes,
the majority
and whether it was IO or what have you, and those are beginning to. I mean, you got a 5-year, you got a 7-year. Just in talking with some folks, it's starting to. They're resetting.
Yes.
So
they can't afford to stay in their home.
Right.
But to Peter's point, he's right. I mean, I work in a building, and most people out there know the building I sell in the Midtown West. I mean, for the past 17 years. Many of those are still first-time homeowners, okay? And they bought from me 17 years ago, 10 years, whatever it was. And they're experiencing 3%, 3.8, 4% interest rates. And they say to me, I probably can count 9 or 10 apartments of my sellers in that building that want to sell and have wanted to sell for over a year now, need to sell. Families are growing. Apartments are too small. They meet somebody, a studio or a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, not big enough for them anymore. But to your point, they can't. Because where are they going to go and double that interest? Why would they go and double that interest rate? My other question is to you all: what about are the sellers prepared, or are they thinking about, based on everything we've talked about, are they thinking about potentially reducing their prices? We all know that that's a major issue for sellers, but based on the past is the past, doesn't exist. Based on today, if you really want to be a serious seller, will they reduce their prices?
So I find that sellers look at what they paid before, and if they can't get the same price, they don't want to sell. Now, if they're making money on it, that's great. But if they're losing, they're not willing to.
And I saw Barbara Corcoran on TV recently saying that when interest rates come down, she thinks prices are going to go up between 10 and 15%.
Oh, boy.
But I don't know, because how's that going to help anybody? That leaves people
and
directly.
How much would it have to go down for that to happen?
Yeah, she thinks that if it starts with a 5, prices are going to go up 10 to 15%. You're going to see everybody running to get every apartment that's available on the market. I don't see how that solves the problem, right?
Well, you've also got an election year, a federal election year, right? And so I've seen some stats that 8 out of the last 11 election years, there has been a decrease in interest rates, followed by an increase in, I think, 10 of the last 12 years after the election in both sales prices and deals done. So I feel like because we're in the election year, and Mike has said, yes, I've seen activity pick up in the fall. But typically, from July on until that election, people are on the sidelines.
Sorry.
And then afterwards, there's this pent-up demand, and they go. So
yes, and I've said again on this program many times, the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market, it you flip the switch and it changes, okay?
It does.
And so with all the proposed rate drops and potential, as Peter said before, sellers increasing prices, what typically happens when the buyers are home, under their bed with the door locked, can't buy. I'm waiting for prices to go down even further. That's their thinking. Now we switch to a seller's market, and what happens? The door gets flung open, they go running down the street with their hair on fire, and they can't buy fast enough. Why? To Peter's point. Sellers raise the price, and they think, well, if I don't buy now, the prices are only going to go up.
Right.
So where were you when the prices were down?
Right.
When you could have got a deal. So maybe you're right. Maybe the seller is going to raise the price, and I wouldn't be surprised. And guess what? We'll sell.
And where are the cash buyers when the market is down?
Well,
Because not a lot of them buy now. They just wait for all the activity to happen.
well, they sit back and
they're
wait.
buying
However,
luxury,
they're buying
right?
very high-end
Some-
luxury buildings
Yeah.
or apartments, but very high-end. But for the most part, they're all sitting back like
Exactly.
everybody else.
It's crazy.
Right? And, the summer is never a great time for market anyway. I think the fall is going to be a lot better this year. But I have family up in Westchester that I visit on a regular basis. And one of the things that always astounds me, especially in the last 2 years, okay, where interest rates have been ridiculously high across the board, right? The Westchester market has been and continues to be on fire. On fire. Houses and condos don't last more than days on the market at all price points. Why is that? I ask this question
especially
every
if
week on this
the
program. Why
taxes,
is that?
too.
And the taxes are insane.
Right.
Well, because
So what's the difference in mindset with people who live there and people who live here?
because the people that live here that need to get a larger place will move over there, and it's affordable for them there rather than buying something larger here. Let's say their family expanded and they can't live in a one-bedroom anymore. They can afford one there.
But when you put pencil to paper, and as James said before, a minute ago, the taxes are insane. So for those buyers who are concerned about monthlies, right, you break that down, divided by 12, and you add that, all right, you don't have maintenance up there. I mean, regular maintenance, but you have house maintenance, right?
yeah.
Right.
How do they afford it?
Well, I mean,
You're looking at
it's
houses
less-
at $35,000 a year in taxes. Really? Come on,
Or
now.
more.
Or more.
I mean,
Well, schools are more expensive here.
schools-
If you
yeah,
go
if you're
private
public
school.
versus
private school,
private,
right.
right? That's the whole
Well, everything
calculus.
is right. Everything is relative, but the houses are going off the market fast and furious. It's unbelievable. My sister is looking for something, and every time we look at find something, and I call and inquire about it. Oh, accepted offer. Oh, contract out. Oh, contract signed. This has been going on all year. So, people say to me, well, you work in Manhattan. It must be the same in Manhattan. I think, no.
No, it's
no.
I think these are people who were renting here, renting 2 bedrooms.
Well, that too.
Have 2 or 3 kids and have been saving money. And instead of buying, the $2 million apartment here, the Classic 6 for 2.5 or whatever that is, will buy the house in Westchester or New Jersey or Connecticut for 1.5, not buy here. So we're missing that buyer. And they will go to a community where maybe one house comes on every week. So 10 people want it.
Right.
So they're
Well, there's a lot of that too.
yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing, those people who would have bought with me and stayed there for 5 to 10 years before moving to, and they're skipping that step.
Yeah. So let's talk about inventory, right? So, as all of you have said in conversations this morning, inventory, my opinion, isn't going to increase potentially because, as you said, Peter, where's a seller going to go who's got a 3 or 3.5 or 4% interest rate? They really can't. Even though, the interest rates will come down for buyers, it's not going to meet those numbers. So how is the inventory going to increase whereby we will have more to sell here in New York City if sellers are going to still sit back and say, well, I'm not quite sure I'm ready yet to sell? How are we going to stimulate that side of the market, the seller side, with a great interest rate? We need product. We need more inventory. How are we going to do that?
Well, I think that as interest rate goes down, little by little, I think the sellers will enter the market slowly. Some that really have been waiting for a long time to sell will say, okay, it's not what I want, but I can buy something now at this rate. So let me put the house on the market. But,
sellers like
time.
buyers have to get used to the new normal, right? And it's just, they have
New
to.
normal. Oh my God, that word.
Well, the new normal is rates that aren't, ridiculously low, and
Yeah.
they will get, they'll get used to it, and they'll say, okay, but I know I'm not going to pay what I have been enjoying, but I want to move. And they'll do it.
Let's just put on the table the ridiculously low interest rates of the past was by design, okay? To stimulate the marketplace, to get things moving and get things jumping. They were never the norm, right? It was never the normal. I've said on this program again for years. I started at 17% interest rate, my first purchase, 12%, 11%, 9%. When I got to 7% fixed for 30 years, I thought I robbed the bank. 7%, fixed 30 years. Oh my God, we celebrated.
Yeah.
Okay? So come on, really? It's all psychology. It's all perception. So, will it get down to 3% again, 2.5%? Never.
No.
That was not normal. That was not ever meant to be other than for reasons to stimulate our environment, our economy, our industry. What are your predictions for the rest of 2024 in the few remaining minutes that we have? Presidential election year, the fall season, whether we get a 50 basis point reduction or not. What do you predict the end of the year to look like, Jim?
As Peter said, it's really about restoring some certainty. And so after that election, right, then I do firmly believe that we have Powell has his rate cut, if not one or two more. Mortgage rates will fall in line, and more people will be in the market. I really do feel that. Rents are, as we've discussed, medians are all-time highs. And so I think that people are just sitting in their apartments waiting for that uncertainty to clear and then rates to be a little better than they were. And they have. They've declined, was it the last 17, 18 months?
Yeah.
Not precipitously, a little bit here and there.
Yeah, it's okay.
But yeah.
Moving in the right direction.
Yes, that's what I feel.
Peter, from a legal perspective, you deal with lots of sellers, lots of buyers, very big business. What, in your opinion, or what do you see the remainder of the year looking like?
Well, I could only really judge it by how this summer looked for us. Normally in the summer, we're closing all the deals that came through in the spring, and we don't see a lot of new deals come across our desks. But this summer has actually been different for us. And we're a pretty good barometer of the marketplace because obviously we get referrals from dozens and dozens and dozens of agents. We've been busy. Especially in August, with bringing in new business.
Typically a sleeper month.
Which is typically a sleeper month. We have a lot of new deals being signed. So, hopefully that's a sign of good things to come.
Hopefully
I don't have a crystal ball, but based on how we've been trending this year, it was a slow beginning of the year, and then we started to see the spring really pick up, and then the summer, which is usually slow, has been active for us. So that's hopefully a good sign.
I think we can safely say that through the years, things have changed so significantly. We used to have very defined periods of time or periods of season where things are busy, not busy, whatever. Now it's a free-for-all for everything. Dorothy?
Well, I think after elections, we're going to see more activity. I think people are just waiting. Let's wait. Let's see what happens.
Enough with the waiting already.
Yeah, no, but I just think people need a breather, and people are very concerned about the elections, one way or the other, whatever side they're on. And I think after that, it will be like, okay, now we can start looking. Now let's make our move.
Mike?
I'm feeling an optimism. I'm feeling activity when I'm making appointments for buyers. The brokers are busy. I'm encouraged. I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be price-sensitive activity, and we have to keep reducing until we find the right price for the buyer to come in. And we don't know what that magic number is, and sometimes 2% can mean it happens.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we're going to be busy. And I like what you said about it being a busier August. I feel that's a good predictor of what we're in now.
I agree with everything that was said. I also remain optimistic. I do believe that we have to get past the election for whatever wait period we need to go through yet again. But I think that once that's over, I come from the days when I wanted to buy something, I bought it. I didn't care what the market was. I didn't care what this was. I just did it. And then if I didn't want it anymore, I sold it. And then I did it again.
Yeah.
Right?
Like your car.
It's like, just do it, people. Just do it.
Right.
We sit back and analyze. We overanalyze everything and not
It's
always.
paralysis.
Totally.
Spoken
that's
like a true agent.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's my rant for the Table Talk. Coming back with my thoughts for the week right after this. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at stephen@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
All All right, everybody, we're back with my closing thoughts of the week. Hosting this podcast for the past 10 years is an impressive feat that speaks to both consistency and adaptability. It requires the ability to stay relevant, engaging, and connected to my audience over a long period of time, which can be challenging in a fast-evolving media landscape. Longevity like this often means you have cultivated a strong, loyal listener base and successfully adapted to changes in technology trends and listener preferences. And we have. The show is very popular around the globe, and I am forever grateful. Over the past 10 years, the show has evolved in terms of content, format, and production quality, and we have built a deeper relationship with our guests, industry experts, and sponsors. For me, there is also the fulfillment that comes from creating a platform that resonates with people, sparks discussions, even inspires change. At the same time, maintaining momentum for that long period of time always presents challenges like avoiding burnout, keeping the content fresh, and staying motivated. Balancing creativity with the demands of regular production schedules while also navigating new competitors and trends is time-consuming. After 10 years, the podcast has evolved into a larger brand, branching onto YouTube now, so for the past year, you can see us as well as listen to us. We have a great sponsor, Roadway Moving and Storage, and we are very grateful to them for their support to the program and the dedication they have for our show and network. I am deeply humbled by all of this. This show is my happy place, a must-happen weekly event in my life, or I don't feel accomplished. It takes a village to produce, write, and plan each week, but the success says it all. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, stay engaged because there is so much more to come, and Godspeed to everyone. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can always follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco, or my website, thinkvince.com. And Edgar Allan Poe said, "Sometimes I'm afraid of my heart, of its constant hunger for everything it wants, the way it stops, and also the way it starts again." And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us, and we will see you next time. I'm grateful, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye, and God bless.